The Boston Bruins appear ready to name a new head coach, and all signs point to it being former Dallas Stars bench boss Jim Montgomery. Going to talk about that and more on today's episode of Locked On Boston Bruins.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things spoke to be, as well as take a look around the NHL. Today is Friday, July 1st. Happy Canada Day to all my fellow Canadians. I want to thank you all so much for making Locked On Boston Bruins part of your day. Podcast available on all podcast platforms, as well as on YouTube. Search up Locked On Boston Bruins, and you can subscribe, download, listen, and enjoy. If you could also rate and review, that would be very much appreciated. I think June was a top 5 month in the history of the podcast, despite the fact the Bruins were not playing and had been eliminated in the first round. But there was quite a healthy news cycle, as we recall, highlighted by the dismissal of head coach Bruce Cassidy. Before we get into what appears to be an impending announcement in terms of the next head coach, quick reminder that you can follow along on Twitter and Instagram at LockedNHLBruins, and you can find me, my dad jokes, hockey tweets at Ian C. McLaren. Excuse me. So last night I was playing softball and happened to check my phone between innings and saw a few insiders had posted that Jim Montgomery appears set to be the next head coach of the Boston Bruins. Elliot Friedman said he was hearing there is growing momentum with Jim Montgomery as next coach in Boston. Pierre LeBrun tweeted all signs point to Jim Montgomery most likely being the next head coach of the Boston Bruins. Nothing is finalized yet, but he's the front runner to land the job according to sources. That was at 7:21 p.m. And then Frank Saravelli tweeted, it appears as though Matt Murley, who's a former pro hockey player, was first on this. But Jim Montgomery, indeed, well down the track of becoming the next head coach of the Boston Bruins. As I record here on Friday morning, there's no official announcement from the team. But with all of these insiders jumping on it, safe to assume that we should hear something probably today heading into the long weekend. Again, nothing official until the team makes the announcement. Hearing reports online is one thing. Seeing insiders like Friedman, LeBrun, Saravelli jump on it is quite another, and that leads me to believe that it is likely to happen. Now, earlier this week, I talked a lot about David Quinn. It appeared as though he had the inside track on the position. He had a couple interviews, reportedly met with ownership. Jay Leach was also believed to be a leading candidate. But again, per multiple sources on Thursday, the Bruins have decided to go with Jim Montgomery, Blues assistant coach, whose first NHL head coaching position in Dallas was interrupted after just 113 games. Let's address the elephant in the room right off the bat. Why is Montgomery available in the first place? Back on December 10th, 2019, just before, the COVID pandemic hit, Jim Montgomery was let go as head coach of the Dallas Stars after a pretty successful start to his NHL tenure. And that was a result of unprofessional conduct inconsistent with the core values and beliefs of the Dallas Stars and the National Hockey League. At a press conference, General Manager Jim Nill said the situation had come to light the previous weekend and involved a material act of unprofessionalism, which was egregious enough to demand an immediate firing. Elliot Friedman later said Montgomery was fired for a personal behavior issue. Stars were not divulging the details, but in January we learned that Montgomery had checked himself into a rehab facility to deal with alcohol abuse. He said the Stars made the right call in firing him and that the decision made him realize he was living a damaging lifestyle. In May of that year, Montgomery told Pierre LeBrun that December 10th, 2019 changed his life. He deserved to be let go, didn't deserve to earn money for his actions, didn't do the right things that he asks of his players all the time. However, from that point, he went on what he called an incredible journey, a new journey in sobriety that began with a lot of fear and anxiety and a lot of guilt. But with the help of many people, especially family, close friends, and numerous great people that suffer from the same addiction, as well as his daily conditioning that he's learned, he's a confident, hopeful, mindful, and incredibly grateful person. In terms of, whether or not he's in a better place, obviously that is true. He was hired by the St. Louis Blues as an assistant coach. He worked with the forwards. He worked for the penalty kill. And he said prior to being hired that he was confident in the plan that he had to maintain a steady lifestyle, a healthy lifestyle. He said he can apply it anywhere. There's people he can connect with on the phone or meet in person. It's easy to do even if you're on the road. It's just about making the time and making sure you're taking care of yourself in your recovery. He believed then that it could make him a more efficient coach. Obviously, there were nights when he spent time doing the wrong things. Going to be time now to do the right things, and that can only make him a better and more focused coach. So the Boston Bruins appear set to hire Jim Montgomery. We're going to talk here in a moment about his coaching record and what he will bring to the Boston Bruins. But first, a quick word about BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. You can find all the latest sports developments, league reviews and news, including Major League Baseball. They're also your continued source for all sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, props, and scores. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events. Head to their website today. Use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action at BetOnline, where the game starts. Thank you so much again for making Locked On Boston Bruins part of your day. The podcast is free and available on all platforms as well as on YouTube, so please do subscribe. The NHL Draft is right around the corner, and our team of local hosts and draft experts are breaking it down with insights and analysis for every first-round pick. Subscribe to Locked On Boston Bruins on YouTube for all the latest breakdowns and live reactions on Boston's NHL Draft picks and more. And you can follow along with our local experts as they make their picks. So who is Jim Montgomery? For those who don't know, we've kind of talked about his personal journey from the St. Louis Blues back back to the Dallas Stars to a new head coaching position. And really, if it was just a hockey decision, Montgomery would still be head coach of the Dallas Stars. He was well liked by the team, general manager Jim Nill, and Stars ownership. But December 2019, at a holiday party, there was an unprofessional act that required his immediate dismissal, and it was based in his struggles with alcohol addiction. That's the general story. The Bruins, of course, will have done their due diligence to make sure they have support systems in place to help Montgomery, and he's going to be motivated to prove that he's deserving of one of the 32 head coaching jobs. Again, he did a great job in St. Louis, working with their forwards, working on the power play, something that really struggled for the Bruins down the stretch. He has a reputation of being outgoing and engaging. In St. Louis, he was regularly encouraging to young players, according to Fluto Shinzawa, Sean Shapiro, and on The Athletic. He was regularly encouraging to guys like Robert Thomas, a 22-year-old center who broke out this past season, scoring 77 points in 72 games. Another thing that played well for Montgomery in his time with Dallas was his ability to be critical and positive, sometimes balancing those at the same time. He was demanding, not afraid to call out top players, but he also had players on equal footing, which is well respected in the Stars locker room. That was a criticism of Bruce Cassidy, right? Or that was the rationale for his firing. Perhaps a bit too heavy-handed at times. Perhaps didn't relate well with some of the younger players, like your Jack Stanikas, guys that have come and gone through trades. And he made sure to connect with them before each season, Montgomery did. He took a trip to Finland to visit Stars players before his first season in Dallas. Before landing in Dallas, he coached at the University of Denver for 5 seasons, winning a NCAA championship in Denver. He coached a guy like Danton Heinen, who was drafted in the 4th round. And Heinen regularly spoke highly of Montgomery. He also coached some future NHLers like Troy Terry, Dylan Gambrell, Logan O'Connor, who just won a Stanley Cup with the Colorado Avalanche, Trevor Moore, and Will Butcher. Now, one of Montgomery's strengths is also helping to create offense. Obviously, one of the Bruins' shortcomings was their inability to generate consistent scoring 5-on-5. The power play also lagged at times, especially late in the season. Montgomery was huge in St. Louis in terms of initiating a transformative style of play, according to The Athletic. They used to take a belligerent, button-down, defense-first approach to smother opponents. That helped the Bruins beat the Blues beat the Bruins in the 2019 final. But this past season, the Blues scored 199 5-on-5 goals, fourth most in the league. They had 9 players who scored 20 or more all-situation goals. The Bruins only had 5. The Stars did have some success under him as well, making the playoffs. They were a frustrating team to play against. And of course, the Stars team that advanced to the Stanley Cup final in 2020 began the season coached by Montgomery. Not to say that if he was still at the helm that he would have had that same success that Rick Bowness did, leading the team to the final. It was a weird situation in the bubble, but Montgomery's time in Dallas was fairly successful. And he was hired by the Stars because of his track record at the University of Denver. He was a Coach of the Year, National Coach of the Year in 2017. He led them to a NCAA championship in 2017 as well. And that made it appear like he was one of the better candidates heading into that season. And he certainly was. His personal issues are what caused him to be fired from the Stars. And we have to believe that the Bruins did their due diligence, probably talked to some former players, and yeah, the work that he did in St. Louis this past season, their offense was incredible and kind of exceeded expectations. Not what you would expect from a St. Louis team, especially one that we're familiar with in terms of the team that beat the Boston Bruins in 2019. So again, nothing is official, but it really appears as though Jim Montgomery will be the next head coach of the Boston Bruins. ESPN's Kevin Weeks reporting it's a 3-year contract. A formal announcement could come as early as today. And when that does, I'll try to get a YouTube video up as quickly as possible. So nothing official, but all the insiders are on it. And Jim Montgomery appears to be the next head coach of the Boston Bruins. He does have a career record with the Dallas Stars of 60, 43, and 10. He did lead the Dallas Stars to the second round in 2019 as well, which was pretty impressive for his first season as head coach of the Stars. So altogether, he beat Nashville that year as well. So yeah, it looked as though David Quinn was going to be the head coach. I had tweeted the other day that the longer it went on, the more they might take a chance on someone perhaps not as safe. And that appears to be the case here with Jim Montgomery. I like the hire, to be honest. He was successful in Dallas, successful in Denver. He seems to have a really good relationship with his players, and both young and old. And I believe he'll really get the most out of this team. And that's what they need. All things considered, would have been great to retain Bruce Cassidy, but Jim Montgomery, I believe, is one of, if not the best available guy. Derek Lalonde was hired by the Detroit Red Wings. Rick Tocchet appears set to be hired by the Winnipeg Jets. Barry Trotz decided not to pursue an NHL head coaching position this year. Probably not the best choice for the Bruins anyways. And Jim Montgomery, I think, is a really good hire, and I'm glad to see that he's doing well. And I hope he succeeds as coach of the Boston Bruins. Before we get to some news and notes from around the NHL, quick word about Built Bar. From the people who invented healthy and tasty comes the latest gift to your taste buds. You've probably tried the amazing coconut brownie chunk Built Bar, but guess what? Your friends at Built have given coconut brownie chunk the Puffs treatment. That's right, the coconut brownie chunk Built Bar flavor you love, in a deliciously chewy marshmallow covered in 100% real chocolate. It's like a fluffy cloud of coconut brownie goodness. Stop drooling and listen. They're only available for a limited time, and they're low calorie, low sugar, high protein, and delicious. Go to build.com, use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order. This delicious, coconut-rich, sweet brownie, creamy marshmallow. Stop fantasizing. Get to build.com to order your box of coconut brownie chunk built puffs right now. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off your order. So typically on July 1st, it is NHL Free Agency Day, but that has been bumped to July 13th this year. Everything a bit slowed down. One player who could become available is Jesse Puljujarvi of the Edmonton Oilers. It appears as though he and the Oilers, they had some issues early on in his time, caused him to go back to Finland to play. If you watched the Stanley Cup Final and you saw Valeri Nichushkin, that's the kind of game that Jesse Puljujarvi brings to the NHL. And I would, for one, love to see the Bruins scoop him up. Remember, they're pretty thin on the right side. You have David Pastrnak, obviously, Craig Smith. Perhaps Fabian Lysell could come in and make some noise. But you had Jake DeBrusk playing on the top line on the right side. Imagine Marchand, Bergeron, Puljujarvi, Hall, hopefully somebody else, Pastrnak, and then DeBrusk, Coyle, Smith. That could be a pretty effective third line for the Boston Bruins. That, of course, all depends on if they can come up with something that's palatable as a return and whether or not they can fit some or make some room cap-wise as well. So we're getting into the draft. We're getting into free agency. There's going to be a lot of movement, a lot of reports coming out there. Keep it locked to the podcast, and I'll bring you all the latest on the black and gold. Now, when it comes to other Atlantic teams making noise, it appears as though the Maple Leafs are open to trading the rights to pending UFA Ilya Mikheyev. He could be a very tantalizing forward on the market for an acquiring team, and that could kind of weaken the Maple Leafs in a bit. He was a pretty effective depth forward for them as well. And of course, one of the big names to keep an eye on, center-wise, Nazem Kadri, Evgeny Malkin. These are all guys that would be great for the Bruins to target, although, again, the cap space will be a big issue. But for right now, the Bruins look to be hiring Jim Montgomery. One thing off their list in terms of off-season priorities. Patrice Bergeron's return was another. Not officially signed to a one-year contract, but looks as though that's going to be happening. And now their attention turns to the draft, to free agency, and they're going to have to get creative in terms of staying afloat over the first couple months of the season without Brad Marchand, without McAvoy, without Matt Grzelcyk, without Mike Riley. And finally, getting David Pastrnak signed to an extension is also a priority. But Montgomery, the head coach, that's the biggie. And again, not quite official, but I'll be sure to post a YouTube video at Locked On Boston Bruins when the announcement comes. And, not official, so perhaps it could be somebody else, but all signs point to it. Matt Murley first on it yesterday. All the insiders jumping on it later that day. And it seems like only a matter of time. Happy Canada Day again to all of you north of the border. Happy 4th of July on Monday. I'll be back on Monday with a brand new episode of Locked On Boston Bruins. Keep it locked for all the latest when it comes to breaking news. Locked On Boston Bruins on YouTube. Take care of yourselves, friends. Take care of each other. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you again here on the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day.